you've been through two kind of political revolutions in different areas, in different parts of the world. What were the cultural differences like?
They weren't used to black people. And I always found it very odd that sometimes you'd get, overt racism. But when you got to know somebody, they would, think, oh, actually,
You're not that bad after
you're
all.
not that bad. And I remember I had some class friends they would be saying some things to, other people, but then they'll say, oh, but, you're not like that. But I was. But,
Yeah, I guess to some extent you're almost representing all black people to that community, and
I suppose to them, yes, but Africa has 54 countries.
Yes.
So many cultures, religions. Just like Europe has so many countries. All white people are not the same. All black people are not the same. We have differences. And I think at the bottom of it, as people, we all have aspirations. Just because you've got a different color doesn't mean that you've got different aspirations.
STEMinism, the Equity in STEM podcast, sponsored by the Royal Society of Chemistry, where we hold conversations about race representation in STEM with the greatest minds in industry and academia. Hello and welcome to STEMinism, the Equity in STEM podcast,
where we look to rise to the next level of equity in science,
technology,
engineering,
and mathematics.
My name is Clive Sowa.
And I'm Ali Saad, and collectively we are
Van Tart STEM.
Excellent. So, on to our guest. So this man right here is honestly one of the nicest people I've had the pleasure of meeting in the chemical sciences. Originally hailing from Zimbabwe, he holds not one but 2 master's degrees in biochemistry and biotechnology. In fact, he once wrote a paper on how to characterize or analyze beer, which was prepared by a unique fermentation process. So he is one of the most experienced and accomplished analytical chemists that I've personally had the pleasure of meeting. I've come to him a number of times with queries for technical assistance. He's a leader in many respects, and to give you an example, he actually, in a previous role, in a previous life, both conducted and oversaw the fuels testing program for Formula One. No small deal. In my travels, I've chatted to people who have either met or spoken to our guest, and every single person only has great things to say about him. So in more recent years, he's worked as a consultant, offering technical assistance to a worldwide client base for matters concerning petroleum and petrochemical cargoes. You might find him somewhere on a ship, maybe in a lab or at a port, but wherever you find him, it's guaranteed that he's going to be on point with that charming smile and big booming laugh. A member of the Royal Society of Chemistry and a chartered chemist, ladies and gents, and those who identify differently, today we're here to talk STEMinism with Albert Rwarasika. Albert, how's it going? Are you well? Have you had a good day?
I'm good. I'm good. Mustn't grumble, as they always say. I'm
Excellent, good. Excellent. Well, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Clive, do you want to kick things off?
That's right. It's an honor and privilege to be in your presence. I think just hearing some of the wonderful things that you've gone on to achieve in your career, I think the first question that comes to mind is maybe going back to the beginning. What were the formative parts of your growing up, your upbringing, your especially in Zimbabwe, that led you to be the wonderful man that we have in front of us today?
I was born in Zimbabwe. I'm one of 4. I've got a brother and 2 sisters. My father was a teacher, and in the end, he became a headmaster. My mother was a till operator at a local supermarket called TM, Thomas Mikos. My father was very keen on education. When I was growing up, as you can imagine, when I was born, the country was called Rhodesia. And then in 1980, we attained our independence. But my primary school, I went to a black-only school, primary school up to the age of 11 years. And then when Zimbabwe got independence in 1980, I changed, we moved house. My father was lucky enough that he could afford to move to the suburbs then, because when we were born, it was a sort of like a segregated, blacks could only live in one area and white people could live in another area. So after independence, my parents were fortunate enough to get a mortgage, moved to the suburbs, as they call them, and I went to a multiracial school. That was primary school. After primary school, I went to a secondary school, a boys' secondary school. For me, that was one of the best moments of my life when I went to secondary school, because I was lucky enough that I didn't have to work very hard with school. It just came naturally. I wasn't the best, but school wasn't a chore for me. And I liked going to school because I had friends there. Later on, after my A-levels, I was lucky enough to get a scholarship through UNESCO. As you can imagine, in Zimbabwe, there was only one university. So places for somebody to go to university, places were very contested. But I had enough grades that I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship. And I went to Czechoslovakia then in 1989. That was in September. And then in November that year, the Velvet Revolution happened. And the country changed its name in 1992, 93 to Slovakia. One thing that I had to do when I arrived in Slovakia, I always thought all white people speak English. And one of the things that I wanted to do, or I was dreamed of doing, was to go on a plane. I didn't care where I was going to go to. I just wanted to go on a plane. So I was lucky enough to go on a plane, travel to Czechoslovakia then, and lo and behold, they didn't speak English.
Wow.
I was then told that I needed to learn the language. So I learned the language we had a language course, intensive language course. At the end of the language course, you had to do an entrance exam to university. I was fortunate enough that I passed the entrance grade. Then I went to university in Slovakia. All the studies were in Slovak. I speak and write Slovak fluently.
Still today?
Yes. I don't speak enough of it, but I understand. My wife is from Slovakia as well, so it does help. So that's my story. Oh, and then here in the UK, I came in the UK in 1996, and I've been here more than half of my life. And I think I know this country fairly well. Always trying to learn and adjust to things, but I think this is my home as such, because I have a family here, wife and children, and I'm settled.
Oh, that's really beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That was an interesting story and has taken many roots, twists, and turns along the way. So I wanted to touch on, because you were talking about language barriers when you were reaching Slovakia.
Yes.
How did you find the probably quite large cultural differences upon arriving? Was it something that you felt like you had to integrate into, or did you feel like you fitted in quite well?
I wouldn't say I fitted in. It's a predominantly white country. And one thing that was quite apparent when I arrived, it was still a communist country. So it was quite grey. And I remember when I arrived at Prague airport, there were these tanks parked.
Wow.
So I just thought to myself, what have I done? But it was too late. But I just took it on, and I think one thing that I sort of like took on was I always thought, there are other students here. If they can make it, I can make it. There's no way I can't make it. And just that self-belief that I can be somebody. I didn't know how far I was going to go, but I just knew that inherent sort of like hunger that I would make my way through.
That's amazing. I think one of the things I've picked up on as well is that you've been through two kind of political revolutions in different areas, in different parts of the world. What were the cultural differences like going from somewhere where you grow up and everyone looks like you, your majority, as you mentioned, you went to a segregated school, which was just black people, to now being in a completely different environment where there's maybe one or two that may look like you and very different.
Yes, I suppose, when I went to Czechoslovakia, Slovakia then, there were a lot of students from other countries as well. There were some from Angola, Mozambique, few from China, Vietnam, all from all sort of like, countries. The main thing that sort of like bound us when we were there was the language. Initially, when I arrived, there were some students who would say they speak English, like maybe from Ethiopia, but I soon found out that the English wasn't that great. So in the end, we all ended up speaking Slovak. One thing that was quite, sort of like apparent for us was our Slovak wasn't that good in the initial stages, but with time, as time went by, we got to speak the language, and we would try and mingle with the locals as well. But we were different. I mean, for a black person, you stand out like a sore thumb. But when you're in those situations, as long as there's no physical harm to you, you just have to crack on. You get on with life. At that age, I was quite young, so there are things that happen as you grow older as well. And with time, I sort of like found a way to manage situations. One thing that was clear when I was in Slovakia is they weren't used to black people. And I always found it very odd that sometimes you'd get, sort of like overt racism. But when you got to know somebody, they would, think, oh, actually,
You're not that bad after
you're
all.
not that bad. And I remember I had some class friends they would be saying some things to, other people, but then they'll say, oh, but, you're not like that.
Yeah,
But I was. But, so, yeah, that was it.
Yeah, I guess to some extent you're almost representing all black people to that community, and
Yeah, I suppose to them, yes, but Africa has 54 countries.
Yes.
So many cultures, religions. Just like Europe has so many countries. All white people are not the same. All black people are not the same. We have differences. And I think at the bottom of it, as people, we all have aspirations. Just because you've got a different color doesn't mean that you've got different aspirations.
I found it quite interesting. You remarked on it in two different ways. There's the first one you said, and I hear this a lot from my mom as well, which was like, you're in sort of adverse situations and you described it as, you just got to pull yourself together and get on with it. And I think you alluded to that earlier as well when you arrived in Slovakia. Is there something that you can attest to that? So is it something to do with the way that your parents brought you up, or do you feel like this is... Where did you get that sense of power from?
I don't know. Probably maybe from my father. Both my parents, I suppose. When I was growing up, I think it was sort of like put on to you that you need to make sure that you are able to succeed. In what way, it's never defined. But that inherent sort of like hunger that you want to be something, you want to provide for your family was there. And I've noticed, I've got children here, I've noticed that for me, it has never been an issue because I know where I come from. And I found with my children being born here, that sort of like grounding sometimes is a little bit difficult for them. They know where their father comes from. They know where their mother comes from. They've been born in this country. And that grounding is quite difficult for them. I've tried to instill my values onto them, but ultimately they will need to find their own way as well. So I suppose it's like I said, it's coming from my parents and wanting to succeed in life.
Yeah, I wonder if that is a sort of perspective that affects people more from minoritized backgrounds than, say, for example, in the UK, I'm referring to. Yes. So rather than people who were born here or grew up here, I'm not sure. It's just something that I think I've noticed. A lot of black people, they're often of this narrative of you just got to push yourself through. So coming back to the UK then, so obviously you moved from Slovakia to the UK. Did you again feel that sense of an upheaval, or was it much easier to integrate when you came over to the UK?
It wasn't that difficult for me. I'll tell you why. When I was studying in Slovakia, I had one of my best friends living in the UK, Owen, if I can say his name.
Sure.
And I used to come here for holidays, summer holidays. So coming here during the summer holidays was quite good for me because I started to know, to get a feel of the culture. Coming from Zimbabwe, being a British colony, you always thought you knew what Britain was. But coming in during the holidays, it was quite good that I started to get a feel of what this country is like. One thing I did notice was the way they spoke English here is very different from the way I thought. Well, we learned in Zimbabwe how to speak English, so that was one of the I think the difficulties probably that I found here. If you meet somebody from Liverpool, the way they speak, or Birmingham, East End, it's different. So I think I struggled a little bit with understanding how people spoke. I just thought they all spoke the Queen's language, but.
The Scouse accent is definitely an acquired taste, to say the least, and you wouldn't be the first to take a while to acclimatize to that. I think you've spoken about the inspiration from your parents and that belief that they instilled in you very early on. Do you think that's connected to your inspiration in STEM? I know you said initially you were given kind of an open way to achieve that success. Where did that hunger and desire for science stem from?
To be honest with you, I never really had sort of like a desire for science. When I was growing up for my O levels, I was fairly good at humanities and science subjects. So it wasn't a natural thing to say I want to do sciences. But when I did my A levels, somehow I chose sciences. And I think probably it was a blessing in disguise that I chose sciences. Otherwise, I wouldn't be sitting here and talking to you. Who knows? So I'm just trying to think the question again.
The inspirations to what led you into science. It sounds like it was maybe just chance.
Yeah, possibly. It was just chance. And when I went to Slovakia, it was sciences that I was doing, and I just carried on with that path. I think for me, science, it's quite logical. It's almost a black and white. Whereas if you're dealing with history or, geography, English, the humanities, there's a lot of interpretation that can come with it. Whereas with science, it can almost be black and white. But, as I have known to understand now with my profession, there are interpretations that scientists can have. Yes.
So speaking of black and white, I think let's get into some sticky topics. All right. So you're a member of the Royal Society of Chemistry. So their published data implies, in fact, I think they put it this way. They've said, we are failing black chemists at every level in industry and academia. And I think a part of that is sort of the underrepresentation of black people in the sciences. I've personally experienced that in the many different companies that I've worked for. I just wondered what your experience was like. Is it a similar narrative, or does it look different from your perspective?
There are very few black people in science. That's obvious. One thing that I've tried to do in my life is I've never sort of thought of, if I'm applying for a job, think, are there black people or are there white people? I have just gone for a role because I think I'm good at that role and I would apply for that. I still remember when I was going for an interview and I was walking through being shown around the company. I was looking at the instruments and what they have, and then it dawned on me, I didn't see any black person. I thought, okay, this is the situation. But I thought, look, this is the job I want to do, and if I'm good enough, they should employ me. So I know visibility is very, very important. It is very important. I've experienced it, something a little bit different with my children when we were looking at schools. If there was a black child or a mixed race child, my children would just immediately go to them, which is, it's good for them. But like I said, I don't think it has ever stopped me from trying to achieve things or trying to go for roles. Because I think if the moment you start doing that, you limit yourself in life. So you should just go for it.
Yeah. It sounds like that self-belief and in not only your own abilities, but also the roles you're applying for and almost taking that onus off yourself and not living up to the self-fulfilled prophecies has been really powerful. In terms of maybe moving up the ladder, you've had some really esteemed roles in your career so far. Has it been more challenging the higher you go up? Have you been able to apply that filter when hiring people as well? What was your perspective been?
I would like to think I got to where I needed to be. But I recall one sort of like an incident where there was some work that was being carried out, and one of my managers sort of like allocated somebody else, a white person, to be doing that job. And I knew I was capable of doing that job. And it kept on happening. And I just thought to myself, hang on, I'm able to do this job. Why is it that I'm not being selected for this? So I approached my manager and asked, and I said, can you please explain to me, why is it possible for me to do that job? And if it is not, can you explain to me why I can't do that job? He looked at me and he thought, okay, next time the job comes, you'll do it. I did. And we alternated with that colleague. But I think one thing that I've learned is not to shy away from those situations, because I'm quite a sort of like, I take things to heart quite a lot. And it's one of those things that if you don't confront it, I think it will just eat you away. So I forgot it.
No, it sounds like it's a great example of sometimes unconscious bias and calling it out directly. And sometimes, as you said, initially you may think, oh, it's because of A, B, and C that I've not been given it. But maybe just by default, that's the person that the role goes to. And by having those conversations and asking the right questions, you are able to get resolutions. And I think that's a really great example of why not only we need to speak up, but also having that self-reflection and having conversations. Sometimes you don't know until you ask. Yes. And once you ask, it opens up these opportunities. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I think I've experienced something similar, and I didn't have the language, I guess, at the time, or the framework to consider that that's what might have been happening. So I guess I was somewhat disillusioned in that process, and I guess, yeah, throughout your career, it's been a healthy career so far. Have you ever felt any sense of disillusionment in your career path, or has it been a continuous, nice, joyous, steady ride?
No.
And for whatever reason as well.
No, it hasn't been a steady rise. No, it cannot be. It's I wish the world was all colorful, but it is not. I have had some bumps, but I suppose it's what you do with that. How do you deal with that? And it's very easy for one to just accept the situation as it is. But if you do, then you're not going to get anywhere. And also, like you said, Harry, it's the courage. You have to have the courage to confront things. It might be sometimes that maybe you're starting a new role, you're still in that junior position, and you don't want to rock the boat. So probably I would not rock the boat at that point.
But do you think people should rock the boat in that position?
I think you need to assess the situation. I think there's no point in, souring everything just for the sake of, you want to prove a point, because you have to think of the end goal. What is it that you want to achieve? And I've noticed that sometimes if you do approach things subtly, you will find some common ground with people. And the moment they start realizing that, after all, you're just like them, you have the same aspirations in life, you get that benefit of the doubt and things can turn your way. And then when you feel you're in that position that you can confront those things, then you can. But it's patience. Patience is a virtue, as they say.
That's right, yeah. And I think another thing that you've touched on there is that sometimes we focus on our differences rather than our commonalities and what brings us together. And that, I think, is so underestimated. One of the things that I've always found to be powerful in roles is finding that commonality. And so, for example, if I set up a meeting with someone new and I ask them what they're into, for example, it sounds like you were heavily involved in F1, which we'll get to. Oh, look, Lewis Hamilton, that's my favorite driver. And if someone's got some skin in the game, as you say, usually that's something. It could be football, it could be music, it could be food. But rather than focusing on the fact that this person comes from here and I come from here, what actually brings us together? Yeah. And so, yeah, just touching on the F1 as a big fan, how does someone get to the level where you're testing these materials? You must have gained an amazing network and sphere to get into that industry.
I don't know. I wouldn't say it was networking. I was quite fortunate that the company I was working for, they had the contract for testing fuels.
Oh, wow.
And it was only when I joined that company, I didn't know that they had that contract. It was only then when I joined the company that I found out about it. And I liked cars.
As most of us do.
Yes, motorbikes and cars. And I think it was 2007.
Wow.
When Lewis Hamilton came on the scene.
Oh, wow. It's been that long.
Yeah, 2007. And it was a breath of fresh air. And I actually called my second daughter, Louise, for Lewis.
Wow.
Love it.
So, I like I mentioned before, I was fortunate enough that I was in that company and I had that interest as well of Formula One. It made work there much, much easier. I think I could have just gone there without being paid. And the opportunities that it opened for me, I was lucky enough that we could get tickets to go to Silverstone, for the whole weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I used to communicate with the race director, so they would organize tickets for us, and these were sort of paddock passes. When I was there, I realized that, I thought this was it. And I suddenly dawned on me that if I'm able to get here, there must be more in life. There must be more things that are waiting for me. So I've, in situations like that, sometimes I think you need to soak in, that event and be grateful, but it's not the BNO. There are things that have always surprised me, in my career, and and just be positive.
Yeah, and as you said, kind of starting off in Zimbabwe, who would have thought that one day you'd be at Silverstone, managing the fuels, taking care of making sure that Lewis has got the right fuel that he needs to do the job.
I don't know about that. I don't know
Maybe in
about
a more
that.
equitable sense.
Rewind a few levels back, but still.
But making sure ultimately that all the drivers have got the right quality. It ties in with things sustainability, climate change, optimization, innovation, and all of these things are really important and key, not only in sports, but also the direction that we go in the future.
So I just wanted to touch on networking and mentoring for a moment. So I've noticed that you're ticking a lot of our values, which are modeled around the word STEM. So that's the self, technical excellence, equity, and mindset. And just focusing on the self for a minute, there's loads of things that you said. So the core is the self, and then around that you have petals of self-belief, self-motivation, self-control, self-awareness. And I feel like these are things that maybe have shaped your path. Another thing that we hold dearly to our sort of our message and our output is the value of networking. So I wondered if you had met any other Black professionals in science that that you've sort of assimilated as part of a network. Do you share a network with Black professionals at all in science?
To be honest with you, I've been in this country since '96, 30 years. I have heavily relied on my networks from when I was in Zimbabwe.
Wow.
From my secondary school. We have a group, we call it MOV, Men of Valor. It's from Mutare Boys High School. And through that, that's how I've got most of my networking. I've a very good friend of mine, one of my best friends, he's here. He works in the pharmaceutical industries. And we're always, exchanging ideas and the like. I know I should, and I think I'm in that position now that I would like to give something back, especially in this country, to secondary school children, possibly university. I'm now at that place where my children are a little bit older, and I'm getting a bit more time to myself, whereas before it was quite difficult raising a young family. You don't have a lot of time.
We can definitely relate to that. We
We're on
can
the early side of that as well.
definitely relate to that.
It's tough.
I think, you've touched on some really key themes there as well. And I think a lot of us form our key friendships around that age, between the teenage years and the early 20s. And it sounds like you've really stuck to that network. And what we found is that they tend to be really good accountability circles. And as you said, not only can you bounce ideas off, but if one member in your group has been promoted and celebrated, you'll gather around to celebrate them. You may even though you're in different countries, you still celebrate them. But actually, it inspires you to think, I need to step up my game, and what can I do in my area? So I think that's really inspirational. Have you had any mentors or anyone that you've looked up to, maybe further ahead in the journey?
Not really, if I can be honest with you. That drive that I've had, I hope it stays. I hope it stays. That has carried me so far. But I suppose maybe in employment, I've come across some managers who have been very free with their time, that they've allowed me to flourish where I've worked. So it was more of a manager, junior role. But I recall one of the managers that I had. He was very, very good, to the point that I think just before I left the company, then we were almost as colleagues. And he would come to me and ask me for my opinion on things, which was quite refreshing, because I just remember he interviewed me, gave me the job, and we're now at the level that we are talking as equals. So yeah, that was very Yeah, I remember.
Rewarding. The apprentice becomes the sensei.
yes.
That's right. That's right.
That's powerful.
Right.
That's powerful. I guess, yeah, that's kind of been similar to myself and maybe for yourself as well, Clive. You know, mentors take many forms. They don't necessarily need to be someone removed from your working world. I found that I've been mentored very much so by my immediate line manager, just as much as other people I've had the fortune of being able to be connected with. So yeah, that's, I guess, also an incentive to pass that down now. So maybe you didn't receive it coming down to you, but it's a nice incentive to pass that down to, as you mentioned, secondary school or university students. And I know the Royal Society of Chemistry, for example, have a mentoring program, so something to consider.
I will. Mm-hmm. I would like to
That'd be
do
great. And
something.
I think even by being part of this podcast, hopefully there are going to be loads of students in both university, and I'm sure your story will inspire many to go on to achieve great things. I think one of the other things I wanted to tie in was just around. I've gone blank now.
Maybe you wanted to talk about sort of like the next generation, like, and okay, maybe I'll ask this question. So if you had like unlimited resources, if you had as much time and as much money as possible, and today you were asked to make a significant change to the balance of equity, how would you approach it? Might be a difficult question, but
I'll try and answer it. I think the key, primary school is still young, secondary school. Because at primary school, you don't know what you want to be in life. You're just hanging out with your friends and just playing. At secondary school, as you get to your O levels, if you're likely to go to A levels, you are starting to think about what is it that you want to do. So if I had money, I would try and get as many companies involved in doing presentations at primary schools, at secondary schools, showing them, possibilities of, jobs that they can do. It could be, the science subjects, or it could be the art subjects, but mainly the science subjects. To be honest with you, the job that I do now, I had no idea that a job like this exists. No idea at all. So I think just offering those capabilities and possibilities to secondary school children, I think is key. Getting companies involved, apprenticeships, maybe scholarships, or getting them roles like maybe summer holidays that they could go to companies and just experience that. Hoping that maybe they see people who are like them as well. Because when you see people who are like you, it's easier for you to aspire to be them.
absolutely.
I was quite fortunate that I didn't have, maybe somebody that I say I want to be like that. I just had that hunger. And I'm lucky enough that it has carried me to where I am at the moment.
All right, that was a brilliant answer, first of all. Okay, so what about in a situation which we're usually faced with, which is limited time, limited resources? Could you answer the question of what either people or businesses could do today?
Any company that wants to, I think, succeed or move forward, the moment you have diversity in a company, it actually enriches. You have different thoughts within a company, which is only healthy, because the moment you have the same sort of people, same mindset, it doesn't move a company forward. So you really, if I had a company, which I don't, I think it will be incumbent on a company to try and have people from diverse, backgrounds as much as possible. Only if those people who are coming in have the same attitude and aspirations for that company. There's no point in just bringing in people for the sake of diversity. That doesn't help, because at some point, those people who are coming in are going to be exasperated. And the ones that are there as well will not, really appreciate. But if you have the same mindset of trying to achieve something together, I think it is key.
I fully agree. It's not just a tick box exercise for the sake of metrics and numbers. It's really deeper than that. And I think what people often underestimate, as you said, is the power and benefit of diversity. A lot of these companies are trying to expand into emerging markets and global markets. If you're only thinking from a certain perspective, you can only take action from that perspective. So I agree fully that the diversity is important and key and more than just ticking the boxes. I think also it's a greater testament to your mindset as well. And I think over the course of this podcast so far, you've dropped so many gems, so many moments of insight that I think will be transformative in so many of our guest lives. I think one question that I'd like to ask you is that if you had one piece of advice that you could give your younger self, so if we were to go back to teenage Albert back in Zimbabwe, or if you're giving your children advice based on all the experience you've gained across multiple companies, multiple continents, what would that piece of advice be?
Ooh, that's a difficult one. But I moral compass, integrity, being true to yourself. I think that is very important. It's very easy for, I think you asked me that question before, for people to conform to things and just, let me just roll over and just go with the flow. This is easy, but I think to be true to yourself is very important. That doesn't mean that if you enter a situation, you want to change things. You adapt, and then within, it's easier then to change things if you are given that possibility. But like I said, moral compass, right and wrong. I think that's one of the key things my parents taught me. I think I touched on it before. My mother was a strong Christian, and those values have always stayed with me. And I've tried to raise my children as well with my wife in that sort of like that ethos, right and wrong and just. So
that's beautiful. I think, as you've said, there's many situations that we go in life and you don't know, you get to the crossroads, you don't know how to act or what to do, whether it's for money or opportunities. But I think you're right, that moral compass, that North Star, as it were, in terms of your perspective and your thoughts and your non-negotiables is really important and inspiring. And I just want to thank you for sharing us with us. Ali, is there anything you'd add to that?
Honestly, I think this was brilliant. I learned things both about you and I gained some insights from this. So I just really wanted to appreciate and thank you for your time. And it's been a really, really interesting journey for you, and excited to see what the future will hold for you. I'm sure great things.
I hope I still have some way to go as well.
Yeah, that's right. It's right. And I think one thing that we like to do on this podcast is, especially seeing the amazing work you've done in the industry, the progression that you've made, the influence you've had has been revolutionary, and I've definitely been inspired by not by the very least what the work you've done in the Formula One. When I go back now, I'm going to be telling my mates that, I know what it takes to make great F1 fuel based on this conversation. And I think what we've realized is that often black men, black people, they don't get their flowers, if at all, whilst they're living. Maybe for example, Mary Seacole did some amazing work. Didn't get the accolades that she received in compared to Florence Nightingale. So we think it's important to give people their flowers whilst they're here. And so on that note,
both proverbially and literally.
That's right.
Proverbially and literally.
Right.
So we have a gift for you, Albert.
Okay.
Hopefully your career will continue to thrive and be as beautiful as this lovely orchid. Just a way of thanking you for the wonderful work that you've done, not only in industry, but also the work that you continue to do in this great mission?
Thank you. I will treasure this.
At least remember us. You'll walk past it and be like, yeah, STEM. I get it.
That's right.
I get it.
That's right. If not, Christmas is coming up and you can repurpose it to someone that would
exactly. We still got the label on there, so just in case you need to.
Love. Thank you.
So just before we wrap up, let's do something a little bit more relaxed, a little bit trivial. Quick fire round. So we're just gonna shoot you a couple of questions, nice and simple. Hopefully it's not too complicated. And if you can just share your insight. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I think we'll quick fire round. I think we've got about 10 or 11 questions.
Quick fire answers as well.
Yeah, we're not going to time you. We haven't got the stopwatch on, but if you want to give an answer, maybe some insight, maybe a sentence inside, that'll be great. So we shall start off with favorite food dish, cuisine.
Oxtail, sadza, and greens.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
You know what? We probably should have had dinner before this podcast because I'm starving now. The oxtail tails sounds amazing. Can you tell us a bit about the rest of the dish?
Well, my wife cooked it 2 weeks ago. It takes a long time to cook. It's almost like when you have your lamb and shank. It's sort of like just peels off the bone. And then you have the greens as well that go with it. And we have our traditional food from Zimbabwe, sadza. My wife has learned how to cook it as well.
That's beautiful.
My kids love it.
I love that. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so, yeah.
We're gonna have to come over for dinner one of these days to validate these facts. Yes. Wow, that sounds amazing. Yes. So maybe moving on. Song, music, genre. What gets you going?
It changes with mood. Sometimes I'm listening to something like JLS or Alexander O'Neill. I remember Shalamar. And then sometimes I switch on to classical music. If I'm doing some work that I need to just concentrate on, I'll have classical music. Might go to rock, Dire Straits. So it just changes.
Love that.
It changes.
Many genres. I love that. So the next one is favorite quote. Are there any quotes that come to mind, or any that you always tell your children when they're doing something?
Yes, my father had a quote that he always used to say to me. I don't know. I hope it's appropriate. I'll try to change the word. He always told about education that. Don't be an uneducated riffraff or rogue. Yeah. Be an educated rogue if you want to be, because you can change it. But if you're not educated, you're done.
Yes.
I love that.
That's brilliant.
I love that.
That's brilliant.
So being a rogue is fine, but make sure you're educated,
yes.
and that gives you the ability to change it from there.
Yes.
That's really powerful. Ali, do you want to ask?
Yeah. What about favorite hobby? Something you love to get up to on the weekends or even in the evenings?
It's spending time with the family, walking. I used to watch F1 a lot, but I think after the 2021 Abu Dhabi race,
it's not the same.
It's not the same. That sort of like dipped it for me. But I still follow it. In general, I just follow all sports. But I think the only sport that I'm a little bit passionate about is Formula One. Cycling, as I mentioned, and spending time with the family. I'm getting to a point where I'm thinking I'm a little bit wiser now. So I like to impact, pass on my knowledge to, especially to my children. There's always a story that I will tell them, and they're always saying, "Oh, we've heard that before."
Not again.
Not again. But that's it.
What about like a role model or like an icon, famous person or something like this that you look up to, admire, or respect even?
I think the only important person that I think is my father.
Love that.
Yeah. I think it's only recently I was going through some photographs and looking at his time when he was young. There were photos that I found of him when he was a young man, and I thought I never knew this about my father. So for me, he's been. I think he'll always be the one that I've always looked up to.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Black dads don't always get the best raps.
Pay them more dues and ask them questions. Learn about them while they're around.
That's it. So next one is dream destination, holiday. If you could be anywhere in the world right now, as much as you'd love to be here with us now on this podcast, where would you be?
Fiji. I think from the time when I was in Zimbabwe, we used to see these adverts of Fiji, and I always just thought, Fiji, that must be a lovely place to go to. Hopefully go with my wife. Not on my own. Because I've been to a lot of places with my work, and when you're there, you always think, I wish I have that other person next to me so that I can share it with, because it's,
That's a really good point. I think we all travel so much for work, and you spend a lot of time in airports and hotels, and when you do that, get that small piece of downtime, it's really nice the company is really important, which is great. And so we'll have to see if we can organise our next podcast episode in Fiji.
Yeah, absolutely. A follow-up episode.
And we'll take it from there. So the next one, I think, is your least favourite subject out of science, technology, engineering, and maths. Are there any of them that grind your gears?
I'll maybe say physics. 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 That one is a little bit. With maths, I'm fairly okay. Chemistry, I'm okay. Yeah. Physics is a little bit.
It's a dark art.
It is. Yeah, I'll say physics. Yes.
Same for me, by the way. I thought I loved it, but it turns out now it's terrible. It's really difficult. What about like something that rubs you up the wrong way? Something that sort of gets on your nerves a bit?
I think when people don't say thank you. Or when they say hello to you and this sort of like a fake grin. They say hello, it's hi, and then they turn around and you can see immediately drops. That irks me. Yeah.
The thank you gets my blood boiling as well.
Because it doesn't cost you to say thank you.
It's true.
A little bit of gratitude. So I think one more, the last one.
Yeah, I'll take the last one. So what animal do you feel best represents you?
Oh, lion.
A lion.
Shumba.
Love that. Yeah, that's great. So that's somewhere you wouldn't mind being on the Serengeti right now?
No. No, but I don't want to be a lion.
Any reason why? What's the thoughts behind lion?
My totem is lion as well. And I think it's powerful, strong, and yeah.
I love that.
Brilliant. Well, I think that about wraps it. It's been a great episode. Albert, you've been wonderful. And we have been Vantis STEM. Until next time, stay blessed.
Peace. Thank you very much.